every person, regardless of their religion, regardless of their race or nationality, must understand what things one must do, what things can't be avoided. And in the Buddha's teachings, this is to make our physical, verbal, and mental behavior free of fault and blameless, to live cleanly. And to live cleanly is a task that should not be avoided. It's something that must be done. And each way of there are methods for doing this, each in its own way. And when one knows the methods for living cleanly, for making one's behavior clean and free of fault, and one undertakes those methods, then this action, doing this, becomes the cause for special happiness to arise, not just ordinary happiness. Humans like happiness. They like comfort. There's no one who doesn't, except for people who are crazy. But the happiness that we're talking about is not the happiness of sense pleasures. The pleasures that come from senses are not special, because animals also understand about pleasures of the senses. So there's nothing special about these. But even though it's nothing special, people are afraid to let sense pleasures go. What is important is the type of happiness that is many times better than the pleasures of the senses. And the cause for gaining this type of happiness is called in Pali Vattu, V-A-T-T-H-U. And this means basis or fundamental cause. So if we want to get special happiness, but we don't do what should be done in order to gain it, then we won't get that happiness. So what is to be done is called in Pali Kiriya, K-I-R-I-Y-A, Kiriya. And this is explained as avasamkatabang, that is what has to be done without fail. And what is it that we need to do without fail? We need to do those things which purify our stream of existence. And this is called punya in Pali, P-U-N-N-A. So the Buddha taught that there are three kinds of these deeds that purify one's existence and that should be done. And the first is dana, punya, the purifying deed of generosity. The second is sila, punya, the purifying deed of morality. And the third is bhavana, the purifying deed of mental development. And if we do these three kinds of deeds, actions each in their own place, that work which we do is something which is something which should be done. That deed brings special happiness without us having to ask for it. It comes automatically. In Buddhism, things like this is not gained by the grace of a god. This happiness comes about by our own work, and it is something to be cherished. Beings, humans, don't want to lack material fulfillment. They don't want to feel small. Human life in itself doesn't really have value. But if one uses one's life, it becomes very valuable. Because we can use our life to do valuable good deeds. It's like extracting gold from a trash heap. Because in our life, we age, we get sick, we die in the end, and where do we wind up? Just in the ground. So it has no guarantee. Therefore, we need to extract the value that we can get from our life in time. The good deed of generosity, dana kusala, is not very substantial, but it opens the door for further good deeds. When we give something, to give is an act of making others happy, because we give something to others to fulfill their needs. It's not an act of making ourselves happy. When we give something, we need to be free of self-interest. And we also need to be free of attachment to the thing that we give. Further, one shouldn't have any desire to get fame as a donor. And only if we give in this way will our dana be clean. So dana should contain loving kindness. It should be free of these faults like selfish interest, attachment to the thing given, and desire to become famous and so on. And it also should have the wish that the recipient be happy to have this thing that I'm giving. May they be happy. This is loving kindness. And also there should be the wish that the person be relieved of the suffering that occurs from not having enough materially. So this is compassion. The feeling of goodwill, wanting others to be happy. This is loving kindness or metta. And in English we use the word loving kindness. It's not the love between sweethearts. That's why the word kindness is attached to it. Kindness, it means it's a friendly love, a pure love. And with this friendly feeling, then there's no hatred. Hatred can't arise. And if there's the wish that others be relieved of their suffering by having enough materially, with this compassion, then there's no cruelty. No cruelty can arise. So this is very important for human relations, to have these two qualities. And when we do dana that contains these two attitudes of goodwill and wanting to relieve others' suffering, then they become strong. And when the feelings of goodwill and wanting others not to suffer, when these feelings are strong, then one is happy to see that others have what they need. One becomes happy to see others' fulfillment. And this is called mudita, or sympathetic joy. It's not false happiness. It's a true feeling. And with this feeling of mudita, or sympathetic joy, then one won't feel envious about what others have. One won't feel jealousy, not wanting to share what one has. So when we do dana, generosity, without any self-interest, with the wish for others to be well, with the wish to relieve their suffering, then the qualities of envy and jealousy are weakened a lot. This type of dana, this type of action of generosity is clean and it's excellent. So when we do good deeds, it's important to do good deeds like this type of dana that is pure. And because it is pure, it is called punya. It is also something which should be done. And when one does something that should be done, then the intention involved giving in this way, it brings about material fulfillment automatically. This is the result of dana. So for us, although dana, generosity, it doesn't bring about peace, but it makes everything work okay for us while we try to gain peace. So if we do dana systematically, then it is called punya kirya buttu, or a purifying deed, which is the basis for special happiness to arise. And among these types of actions, dana or generosity is the least. For human beings, it's very important to be a true human being in a very basic way. If one is human in form, but not truly human, then one's not getting full value from one's life. And when one is not a true human, when one doesn't behave like a true human, then one will get into trouble from those around one. And one causes other people misery. So one needs to have the ability to reflect. Whenever one is about to do something or say something or plan something, whether it's for oneself or for others, one needs to have the ability to reflect on whether this action or speech or plan is beneficial or not. And one also needs to reflect, is it suitable or not? This is very important. And in terms of Pali, this is called sattaka sampajanya, clear comprehension of beneficiality, whether something is beneficial or not, and sappaya sampajanya, clear comprehension of suitability. And better than any worldly education are these two for making us a true human being. So we should be able to understand that if we don't do something that is beneficial, then we won't get good results. And if we do something that is unbeneficial, then we will get bad results. So we need to avoid doing things that are not beneficial. And we need to do things that are beneficial, but also need to think about, are these suitable or not, and only do the ones that are suitable. So one should understand that things which are both unbeneficial and unsuitable should be avoided, just like we should avoid eating poison. And we should understand that doing things which are beneficial and which are suitable, those are something that we should do just the way we take vitamins and nutritious food. We should understand how good they are for us to do. So one with this type of knowledge about what is beneficial and not, what is suitable and what is not, when they think about doing something, saying something, or planning something, or about to do something, then such a person will avoid doing what is not beneficial. And what is beneficial, they will do selectively. In doing so, one won't get the bad results from doing unbeneficial things, and one will get the good results from doing what is beneficial and suitable. So, morality, sila, actions like killing, stealing, adultery, these actions are destructive. both for ourselves and for others, and they are not suitable. And when we reflect on the effects of these actions, reflect on on what happens to us and what happens to others when we have a feeling of understanding how others feel when they're harmed, then one will make one's actions clean. One will restrain, one will keep from doing these actions. And by keeping our actions and speech clean, then a person is basically human. To live like this is peaceful. And in the lifetime, for the present life, it makes our life peaceful to keep refrain from these misdeeds. And in further lifetimes that come, it will give us a good lifetime. Dana, or generosity, giving material things, brings about material fulfillment as a natural result. And morality, behaving like a true human, gives what is called bhava sampatti, or fulfillment of life, fulfillment of existence. And both of these are needed. We should do both. But the more important of the two, we don't want to lose our good life. We don't want to lose our life as a human. So in order to have a good existence, sila is the most important factor. So we have to give priority to morality over generosity. But nowadays, people don't understand that they need to give priority to moral behavior, and as a result, the world is quite immoral. Dana is not included in the 3 trainings, but when one does acts of generosity that are not selfish, that contain metta and karuna, goodwill and the wish to relieve others' suffering, and when one does dana with the ability to reflect wisely about what one is doing, then this type of dana opens the door for us to improve our personal behavior, to have morality. Because acts such as stealing or adultery or lying, these are things that people do out of extreme selfishness. Actions such as killing, lying to harm others and harming in other ways, those are done by people who have no loving kindness, no compassion. So when we do acts of generosity without selfishness and with loving kindness and compassion, then keeping morality, keeping sila becomes easy. And when one can reflect on whether an action, speech, or a plan is going to be beneficial or not, and thus avoids doing things that are unbeneficial, and among the things that are beneficial, when one can reflect on whether it is suitable or not, then one will do those beneficial things that are suitable. And in this way, when we do dana systematically, it brings material fulfillment, and it also opens the door for us to improve our mental behavior. So, because we do dana with the qualities of loving kindness and compassion included, then it means that these mental qualities are being developed, and the result is that we are able to keep our mind humane. We are able to keep a humane mentality, a humane heart. So with this it is easy to keep sila, and we can keep our mind humane also. So if the world would do this, then it would be very, very peaceful. But this is still not yet mental development. This is not bhavana. It is only the ability to reflect wisely and to have an attitude of loving kindness. So we still need to develop the mind with bhavana. This purifying deed of bhavana punya, is to observe the objects that arise at the 6 sense doors when they arise with ardent effort and accurate aim, so as to develop sati and the collectiveness of mind. This is samadhi bhavana. And when one is doing walking meditation, just as the abdomen is the place where rising and falling occur, so in sitting we place our attention on the abdomen to observe rising and falling. In walking, the left step, the right step, they happen at the legs. So we put our attention on the legs, we start with that. Or the lifting and the placing, it occurs in the legs. So we put our attention on the legs to observe lifting and placing. Or lifting, moving and placing, these happen in the legs. So if we want to know the true nature that happens during lifting, during moving, during placing, at the time that it happens, then every lifting, every moving, every placing, we need to put the mind on the leg. And developing the collected mind is called bhavana punya. And when we are able to develop this collected mind, unified mind, it is punya kiryavatu, a purifying deed, which is the cause for happiness. With effort, ardent effort, virya, then laziness is dispelled. And aiming, or vitaka, is the opposite of sloth and torpor, or tina mida. Sati, mindfulness, protects the mind from the defilements. It makes it guards the mind and makes it secure. And samadhi unifies the mind and the mind states on the object. So we develop these qualities, and if they arise every second, then the obsessive defilements that can arise in the mind, the pariyotana kilesas, obsessive defilements, have no chance to arise. And this is like preventing in advance before a disease happens. This is in one's body, in one's whole body, there are the 6 sense spaces, the 6 receptor elements, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. And there are the 6 objects that strike these sense spaces, the 6 sense objects, the sights, sounds, smells, or odors, tastes, touch, tangible objects, and knowable objects. And if the 6 kinds of strikers strike at the 6 receptor elements, then there are also 6 kinds of sparks that can arise: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. So these elements are always happening. They're happening without a break in the body. And although, of course, it is said we should note them all, we should note and know them all, but at the start, when we are sitting, the rising and the falling is the easiest. And because the rising and the falling happen at the abdomen, so we put our attention at the abdomen, just like we're going to greet an important visitor. So we go to the place where the visitor is going to come. And in the same way, we put our attention on the abdomen, and when the rising occurs, we label it rising, and we keep our attention on it from the very beginning to the end. And when the falling happens also, we have our attention on the abdomen, the falling occurs, and we label it falling and observe it from the very beginning to the very end. And we do this time and again. So we should never let ourselves be without an object. We should always be observing every rising and every falling. So just as this is the way we do it in sitting, so too in walking. Every step we need to be observing in the walking meditation. And the steps, the lifting, the moving, and the placing, they happen in the leg. So we start by putting our mind or our attention on the leg. And when we take a step, when we walk at the grossest, observing at the grossest level, observing one step at a time, then when we make a step, we put our mind, we focus our mind on the leg, and we keep it there from the very beginning of the step until the end of it. And so we note it as stepping, or left step, right step. And if we walk for 1 hour, then the first 20 minutes of the hour should be done at this pace, observing one step at a time. And we do this to relieve the stiffness. And the notings, because we're moving more quickly, the notings are not as detailed. And then the middle part of the hour, we observe 2 parts to each step, lifting, placing, lifting and placing. And we have to, from the very moment the foot starts to lift up until the moment it stops going up, we keep our mind on it and we observe lifting. We apply ardent effort and aiming to observe it, to observe the lifting up. And then the placing. We observe it from as soon as the foot starts to release until it's on the ground. So we observe lifting, placing, each time applying ardent effort and aiming to observe it. And we do this for 20 minutes. And then we observe the final part in detail, lifting, moving, and placing. So lifting, as before, to observe the upward movement of the leg from the moment it starts to go up until the moment it stops going up. Keeping the mind on the leg from start to finish. And the moving from the moment it starts going forward until the moment it stops going forward, before it starts to go down. Just that moving forward part. We observe it from the start to the end, keeping our mind on it. And the placing from the moment of the release of the foot until the moment it is on the ground. All that time we apply effort and aiming to observe it, keeping the mind on the leg. So it is very important to observe like this, with every lifting, every moving, every placing. We shouldn't miss any of it at this, when we are walking at the slowest pace. So we need to be respectful in applying the practice. And as was said a few days ago, we have to take the same type of care as we would take when we push a cart that is full of jars of water over rough ground. We can't push it quickly. We have to do it slowly and carefully. So we have to observe so as not to forget. We have to observe every second of the time with respect and care. So the yogis should please ask yourselves at this point, do you do walking meditation like this or not? Do you do walking meditation to develop concentration or not? And if you do it to develop samadhi if the concentration is there, then when you lift the foot and the mind is focused on the foot, what do you know? What do you come to see? When the mind is focused with concentration on the moving, what do you know? When the mind is focused on the placing, what do you know? It's important to be able to say what it is you observe to the teachers. If one can't say what one observes, then it shows that the yogi is working superficially, not carefully. If someone is not working carefully, then it means that they don't understand what is really good for them. So one has to reflect on this, and one has to understand that one is doing this because it's good for oneself. It's for your own benefit. Beings who can't live without food have to eat and drink. And food that we eat is solid. And of course we can just eat it, we can just put it in our mouth and swallow it down without chewing. And we'll still get nourishment from it. But it's not this way in meditation. So just like when we chew the food, when we chew it carefully, the flavor of the food is obvious. If we just swallow it down, it has no flavor, but we can still get nourished. But if we chew it, then the flavor is something we can know. And in meditation, we need to observe with care. We need to observe so that we come to know the flavors that are in the experience, that are like the true nature, which is like the flavor of food. Because when we observe with care, these flavors, the true nature, will appear. So also, when one comes to see experience the true nature, this makes the mind energetic and brings knowledge. So Sayadaw will speak tomorrow about observation with regard to eating and drinking. That's all for today.